Welcome. Hi, everybody. We're so delighted that you could join today. This is Jennifer Rigg with the Global Campaign for Education US. We have an outstanding coalition meeting with huge thanks to Annie, Krista, Stephanie, everybody at the GCE-US team, and all partners for joining in the conversation today. We're really thrilled that we're going to hear from Maxwell Alejandro Frost about school safety, civil rights topics, and especially ways that we can all be active as young people, students around the globe are leading on school safety and related topics. Many of you know Lissy Moskowitz, our wonderful liaison at the Global Partnership for Education. She's the Senior Donor Relations Lead for the US as well as many other countries. And we're really thrilled that she and colleagues at the Global Partnership for Education, or GPE, just recently returned from a trip. And so she'll be sharing with us the latest and greatest on the new GPE model. And our colleague Vernor Muñoz, the head of policy, advocacy, and campaigns with the Global Campaign for Education Secretariat. He's based in Costa Rica. The Secretariat is based in South Africa. Vernor will wonderfully be joining us in a little bit. We know that there's lots of exciting work coming up with the UN Transforming Education Summit, the pre-summit next week at Unesco headquarters in Paris, and then the main summit coming up in September, as well as the high-level political forum on the Sustainable Development Goals. I know that's a mouthful, coming up in July in New York as well. So we'd love to hear from all of you about what you're planning, ideas for our education advocacy together. Huge thank you to people who've already introduced themselves in the chat box. Please go ahead and introduce and share your name, your organizational affiliation if applicable, and where you're zooming in from today. And we will also make sure everybody has the full bios for the speakers, with thanks to Krista for having shared that in reminders for everyone through email. If you have any questions, please reach out anytime. A few housekeeping components. We are recording to help share the discussion. We want to hear from all of you. And we also have automatically generated Zoom transcript or closed captioning available, and everybody can toggle and adjust within your own settings in Zoom to turn that on if that would be helpful for you. And that should be available under a closed captioning or transcript button. Please do use the different actions within Zoom to share your ideas. Both through the Zoom chat, and feel free to signal by selecting the raise hand feature if you would like to come in when we are discussing with our speakers. And like I said, we really want to hear from each of you about what you're planning, not just for this month, but as we think about the trajectory between now and the UN Transforming Education Summit in September and beyond. And with that, we're going to dive right in. We're so delighted that Lissy with the Global Partnership for Education will be able to share more about her recent trip. Welcome, Lissy. And thanks so much for making the time to join us. And like I said earlier, Lissy Moskowitz is the Senior Donor Relations Lead at the Global Partnership for Education. And you can see in the full speaker bios, just her outstanding background. She leads donor engagement for not only the US, but also Canada, UK, and Australia, and outreach to civil society partners, specifically across GPE and donor countries. And so wonderful, the slides are up so you can learn a little bit more about the GPE, or Global Partnership for Education, recent trip. And we're grateful to Lissy for sharing some of the visuals. We hope that this will help everybody feel like you were there on the trip. Over to you, Lissy.
Thanks, Jennifer, and thanks again for having me. It's great to be with everyone. So as Jennifer said, I am the Senior Donor Relations Lead for the US and several other countries, including Australia. I've been with GPE for over 2 years, including in the lead up to our replenishment campaign last year that was co-hosted by the UK and Kenya, and in partnership with so many of you. So excited to be here. Thanks for the opportunity to share a quick update and some pictures from this great mission we took a couple of weeks ago. The Global Partnership for Education, or GPE, is now in our second year of the new strategy. It includes a new operating model, which is really just a shift in how we're working with our country partners. It's now being rolled out to more than 30 countries. And the main shift is really helping our partners move from perfecting an education sector plan to identifying and prioritizing a specific policy or set of policies that will make transformational change in an education system. We're really looking to make change at scale and to reach the most children that we can. So our partner countries are leading the charge on this, and GPE is facilitating broad partner engagement so that we ensure that CSOs, donors, teachers, unions, all the different stakeholders in a particular country are working towards a similar goal behind the government. So we've helped identify a couple of key areas that will really help create systems transformation. I'm sure none of these will be surprising to you, but just quickly, they are stronger data and evidence, gender equality, sector coordination, and domestic financing. We've been getting really great initial feedback from our developing country partners. It's really quite positive. And in May, 3 of us from GPE went on mission to Papua New Guinea to meet with the government and with partners to discuss the new model and ask if they feel like they're ready to join the next set of countries that we're going to roll it out to. So if I can trouble you for the next slide, please. Thank you. So we had a number of meetings throughout the week with the Department of Education. You can see here on the top right corner, we met with Secretary Cumbra, who we've worked with closely for many years. We met with Deputy Secretary Mr. Wingy in the middle picture. He's been really active on the GPE board as one of the partner country representatives from the Asia Pacific region. And then we also spent a lot of time with UNICEF. You can see here Dr. Claude Kamenga on the left-hand side. UNICEF has been the coordinating agent, which is the partner on the ground that really takes point with the government and other partners and stakeholders to ensure that the collaboration is successful. And UNICEF has been in that role for 8 years, so really significant and helpful partner. It was a very big week when we were there because JICA, the Japanese International Cooperation Agency, has recently stepped into the role as coordinating agent, and we had an official handover that week. The JICA colleague is actually embedded in the Papua New Guinea Department of Education, so very well positioned to support the government. Next slide, please. So we've been rolling out this new model, this new way of working with our partners, mostly through webinars, virtual webinars, given COVID and the lack of travel. But in recent months, a lot of our country team leads have had the opportunity to travel, and this was a really wonderful opportunity to spend 1.5 days with the local education group in Papua New Guinea, which it looks a little different in each country, but there it consists of the government, including the Department of Education and the Office of the Prime Minister, a ton of different CSOs, both at the local level, at the global level, development partners, including donors and foundations. So a really wide, broad set of partners. And I think they were really excited to get to meet in person again after so many months because of COVID. It was a really exciting opportunity to see the partnership in action. I think GPE is very well known as a fund. We are very much a partnership, and really observing all these different stakeholders with very different perspectives come together, exchange ideas, was the partnership at its best. We introduced the new model. We talked about gender hardwiring, which is now part of everything we do, from this stage of visioning what a systems transformation look like, through the grant application, through the monitoring and evaluation. It is now the lens through which we look at everything. And we also talked through how the model is shifting to a more flexible and lighter process, which is particularly important in the Pacific, where countries do struggle a bit with capacity. Next slide, please. Oops, I think the other way.
Right, wrong direction.
No worries.
Here we go.
Thank you. So as I said, it was really exciting to see the groups exchange ideas. What we did is we, everyone came in and sat down with their colleagues. The Department of Education sat with their colleagues. The CSOs sat together, and throughout the 2 days, we mixed everyone up. And so it was exciting to hear the brainstorm of, what does system transformation look like in PNG? The ideas were plentiful, ranging from more volume, more equity and domestic financing, strengthening inclusion across a range of different children, strengthening teacher capacity. They also talked through a lot of the challenges that were cited, including infrastructure, rural-urban divide. I think 80% of the country is inaccessible by roads. So it's a real challenge. Teacher to student ratio. So a lot of great ideas and things to dig in on. We also had separate meetings outside of this local education group, convening with local civil society organizations and global to sort of get their perspective on how things are progressing. And I'm happy to share impressions if anyone's interested. And I'll just say here on this picture, this was the formal handover on the left from UNICEF to JICA. It was really nice to have the opportunity to get to thank UNICEF for all its incredible work, and thank JICA in advance, given that they had already actually been embedded in the Department of Education for some time. And then we took a nice group picture. So next slide, please. These last set of slides are from a school visit that we had on our last day, which was really quite a highlight for all of us. We visited the school in the pouring rain, which was unfortunate. It was a school, a primary school in the National Capital District. And you can see on the left-hand side, the true breadth of the partnership. And this is only just, a subset of partners, but the government, GPE, Australia is a real active donor there. Save the Children is the grant agent, which I'll talk about in a minute. UNICEF, and many others. So it was really wonderful to have an opportunity to see the children in action, the teachers in action. Next slide, please. Thanks. So we had a chance to observe some of the classrooms and see some of these e-learner library tablets that the students had. And next slide, please. I think this is the last one. One of the great things we learned about was how the school was using the COVID accelerated funding that GPE and Australia were able to provide to help mitigate the impact of the pandemic. So you can see here some of the wash facilities that had been added since the pandemic, and there was a hand washing demonstration. So, the students and the whole school community was really integrating those wash systems into school to make it more safe to be there. So we also learned a bit about these new psychosocial curriculum that the teachers are undergoing training for, the additional challenges that students face coming in and out of school and the distance learning. So I think I'll stop there. I'm happy to answer any questions or talk a bit more about what the country is eligible for, but it's just a good example of the work that we're doing with a lot of our partner countries as we roll out the new operating model. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Lissy. That's super helpful, and we really appreciate you helping us to see this new model at the Global Partnership for Education in action. We would love to hear from all of you if you have questions, comments, responses, ideas, hearing from what Lissy just shared. And it looks like Bob has his hand raised. Thank you, Bob, for chiming in. And everybody else, please feel free to either raise your hand within Zoom or put a question in the chat box. With thanks to Stephanie for and Bhushan for kicking off the discussion in the chat box as well. So Bob, please come in, and then we'll take a few questions and then go back to you. Let's see if that's all right.
Sure.
Okay, thank you so much. And I want to thank the Global Partnership for Education, the good work which you are doing. What my question is concerning on partnership. We wanted to know whether Global Partnership for Education accepting some small organizations like ours, the community-based organizations, to be their partners? Because what I have heard, it seems you are partnering with the big organizations. I don't know whether you have a room for small organizations, because we do the same work concerning on education in Uganda. So that is my question.
Yeah, thank you for that. And thank you for your work. Yes, we very much encourage organizations of all sizes and levels of expertise to engage. What we normally recommend is to get involved at the country level, and in particular in the local education groups, which really do look different in each of the countries, depending on the different actors and stakeholders. But what we find is that organizations that are local and sort of embedded in the community have really helpful information, expertise, insights into the community that the schools are helping to serve. And so, we very much welcome you to join that. If it's helpful after this, I'm happy to make connections to our country team leads who liaise closely with partners on the ground. But yes, very, very much welcome your participation.
Great, thank you so much. And we shared earlier in the chat some of the links to help people go straight to the to learn more about the Global Partnership for Education. And if any of you would like to get involved as a civil society or nonprofit partner, and you're not yet in the different constituencies, we're happy to help connect you. GPE has an elected structure. So for example, the civil society organization constituencies, I believe there are 3 different ones. For different regions, different areas around the globe, and one of which is related to teachers and education focused organizations representing teachers and education support professionals. We hope that there will be more space in the future for youth and students to have a stronger voice, but there is the GPE board model is really, I think, quite unique in having that level of involvement and representation. So all civil society actors can get involved, like you were saying, Bob, both as a potential partner at national and local level, and also through our advocacy in helping to share ideas through, at the board level and throughout the organization. Lissy, you have a few questions, and then we'll go to Maxwell Frost next after a brief discussion here. So Lissy, if it helps, in the chat box, huge thanks to Stephanie Bouchon for both asking, first, wondering if you could speak, Lissy, on the work you're doing on inclusive education, or that directly impacts learners with disabilities or other vulnerable groups. And Bouchon asked for any example on promoting inclusive education at national level. And then thank you so much to Techwa for asking, with Sightsavers, for saying, linking to Bob's question, what are GPE doing to ensure they partner with OPDs at different levels with organizations of people with disabilities? And Suzanne also is following up on Bob's question and says, I'm also wondering about how much funding actually trickles down to those local organizations on the ground. And I know that's a lot that we're throwing at you, Lissy. So just let us know if we can help with follow-up to answer people's great questions as well. Thanks.
Sure. Let me try to do a broad response to kind of hit the high notes on these. I would say, examples look really different in different countries, but just in Papua New Guinea, we had a local civil society organization join both the local education group workshop, and then we had a separate meeting with just the local NGOs, and we had colleagues there who lead on inclusive education and who've been really outspoken in the country. And this is a really important way to have their voice heard by the government and other development partners. And so we'd really encourage active engagement, again, at the local education group by organizations that advocate for this and that have members who are active. So would really encourage that along those same lines. So the funding from GPE generally goes directly to the partner governments that we support, but we do have a program called Education Out Loud, which is one of the largest funds for advocacy efforts around education. And that funding does go to local organizations. And it's a real important mechanism to help encourage local voices, advocacy, and also accountability for our partner governments. So we encourage you to take a look at that, and we can definitely send some additional information, to follow up. But we just really encourage everyone to get active at the local level in the countries where your organizations work, because that's really where the dialogue happens. Just grateful for everyone's enthusiasm.
Thanks. And it looks like we have one more question, and then we'll shift to the next speaker with exactly like you were saying, Lissy. We're really grateful to hear from everyone about your ideas and involvement. So we're grateful to our colleague Bim with PDRC for sharing that. It's sort of a question about how somebody could get more involved in a specific country and region. So PDRC International, for example, is asking about how they could join with the GPE team specifically on inclusion of the most disadvantaged communities, specifically the Dalit community in Nepal and South Asia. Would you recommend, Lissy, that people should try to reach, figure out who they should get in touch with at a national or regional level? How should they navigate that?
Yeah, we're happy to help make connections. Again, our colleagues at the Secretariat are not based in country. So, they obviously have deep contacts into a country. So either, if you have colleagues who are already there and engaged in the local education group, that's one avenue, or I can connect you with the country team lead and they can put you in touch with the right folks on the ground.
That would be great. And thanks, Lissy. If you're able to share whatever points of contact you would recommend, that would be helpful. Bim, did you want to come in?
Yeah, yes.
Thank you, Jennifer and Lissy, for your response. Actually, we are happy to, because in Nepal, we have a PDRC Nepal as well.
Okay.
If there is a connection, a special focus on the Dalit community in the school right now, in this COVID-19, within the inclusion, the Dalit community are most excluded and they're out of the school. That's why if there is the spatial provision, we need to plan for them for the most, infected due to the caste discrimination. So thank you. It would be great if you can connect each other. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. And Isa in the chat indicated that national NGOs or non-governmental organizations in Africa can help in this emergency in hard to reach locations. For example, some locations in Northeast Nigeria where the insecure levels are very high. National NGOs are doing their best to strengthen education in this moment, but can't access direct funds from the donor organization. So localization is a must for us to achieve the SDG 4s in education, SDG 4 and 5 in education. You're absolutely right. Thank you so much. And I know GPE, ECW, USAID, many of the, apologies for the acronym soup, but many of the funding partners are absolutely looking into localization, and you all as civil society actors and human rights advocates, we realize are very much on the bleeding edge of this topic, right? And so please continue to share your ideas. There were earlier this week, Amplify Girls and some of our partners actually held a Twitter storm on this topic in particular, on helping to support smaller local organizations in particular. I see that the conversation's really flowing here, and so encourage people to continue to share ideas in the chat. Lissy, any closing remarks that you'd like to share? With apologies that Bhushan also just asked, kindly share examples of good practices of teaching children with visual impairment during the COVID pandemic. So maybe if you'd like to point people to some of your fantastic colleagues at the Secretariat that are working on specific topics of interest, or whatever else you'd like to share. Thanks.
Yeah, happy to put some stuff in the chat, and just thanks to everyone. I think it's great to see, the enthusiasm and the partnership and the real excitement for digging in the particular countries, because that's really where our work happens. So I'm happy to make connections and continue the conversation. Thanks again for having me today.
Wonderful. We're so grateful, Lissy. And now I'm delighted to hand over to our fantastic student fellow Annie Lynn, and we're thrilled that actually from Bangladesh, where she's working with USAID, Karina was able to join us today. But over to you, Annie, to introduce our next speaker.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lissy, and it's great to see the conversation flowing. We're very excited to introduce a youth voice. Our next speaker, Maxwell Alejandro Frost. Maxwell is a gun violence survivor and a civil rights activist who has spent his life fighting on the front lines for justice. In 2018, he helped lead the ACLU of Florida's fight to win Amendment 4, which restored voting rights to over 1.6 million Floridians who had previous felony convictions. He's also served as the organizing director at March for Our Lives, one of the largest youth-led political movements in the country. And at March for Our Lives, he led a very ambitious youth voter turnout program that helped to lead to drive record turnout. And since then, in 2020, he's also worked as a national organizer with the ACLU. And currently, Maxwell is running to become the first Gen Z and fourth Afro-Latino member of Congress. Over to you, Maxwell.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for that amazing intro. Hello, everybody. Hope you're doing well. Thank you so much for having me here today. It's an honor to be in this space to talk about how we keep our students safe and how we keep our communities safe and how we can work together to make that a reality. So I have a video I wanted to play real quick to kind of set the tone here. Should I? Okay,
Thanks so much, Maxwell, for letting us know. Yes, it should be set so that you can share your screen if that works on your end.
Yeah, perfect. And so y'all know this video is a video that we helped produce when I was working at March for Our Lives, which is the organization that came out of the shooting that happened in Parkland, Florida. And the video is really based on the power of young people and harnessing that power. So there you go.
Governor confirming that coronavirus has arrived here.
When we were stuck inside, we wondered, would we face the plague of gun violence again? Will we fear gathering in our schools and our churches again? Will we be shot for the color of our skin again? But a fight for justice forced us out to fill the empty streets. Black Americans are still being killed for being Black in America. The pandemic hitting Black, Indigenous, and people of color disproportionately has only worsened the epidemic of gun violence in those same communities. Because it's clear the fight for racial justice is still on, and we won't live without it. In Colorado, he stood against hatred, but in Wisconsin, he carried a Confederate flag. In Arizona, she stood for her patients, but in Michigan, she carried a swastika. They bought guns in record numbers, but we took it to the streets. So when we leave our homes this time, will the people carrying weapons of war and banners of hatred decide our future again? Or will we stand up and demonstrate our power? Our power means we demand all gun sales will be licensed. Our power means we demand weapons of war be banned for good. Our power means lawmakers must listen. Our power means we refuse to watch Black people be murdered in the streets. Our power means we refuse to fear for our lives. We refuse to live without justice. It's our power, and we will use it.
So that is something that we put out. Let me see that is an advertisement and a video we put out during the the height of the coronavirus epidemic, right when everybody was stuck inside. And the reason we put it out is because, believe it or not, gun violence actually went up during lockdown, which is wild, right? People were stuck inside and gun violence still went up. There were still mass shootings. Here in Orlando, I'm in Orlando, Florida right now, it's my home. Gun violence went up 16%. And so I want to start by talking about my story real quick, because I think my story is really similar to the story of a lot of other folks in my generation as far as the beginning of it. I went to an arts middle school and high school here in Orlando called the Osceola County School for the Arts. There I studied jazz drums. And I remember that before every jazz band concert, my friends and I would go to a restaurant across the street called Fridays, and we would load up on a bunch of junk food. And I just remember that we were there eating, and there was a silence that fell across the entire restaurant. It was almost like a movie, right? And we all looked up at the television screens, and we saw that somebody walked into an elementary school in Newtown, Connecticut, and murdered 20 children and 6 teachers. And I'll tell you, for me, I just seeing that on the screen, I couldn't think right. I couldn't play right at the concert that night. And my parents, at the time I was 15 years old, my parents let me go to Washington, D.C. for the memorial that was going on. It was called the Vigil for All Victims of Gun Violence. And I remember being at that vigil, but it was after the vigil that I had an experience that changed my life. You know, it was all of the families of the victims of that shooting. Sitting around this hotel pool, wading our feet in the water, just everyone was talking about how much they missed their loved ones. And across from me, there was a guy named Matthew Soto. His sister, Vicky, was a teacher at Sandy Hook. When she heard the gunshots, she hid her class in cabinets to save their lives, and she was murdered. And, you know, at the time, Matthew was 16, seeing a 16-year-old speaking and sobbing with the demeanor of a 60-year-old, crying over his sister, who was a teacher who went to school that morning to do the job that she wanted to do, teach her students, that she was murdered. It changed my life. And I went straight back to my hotel room. I remember I called my mother, and this is personal to me because my mother is a teacher of 40 years. She actually retires next year. She's been teaching special ed her whole life. And she's finally retiring, which we're really excited about. But I thought about my mom. I thought about my sister. I thought about myself being a student at the time. And I decided that for the rest of my life, I would fight for a world where no one has to feel the way I saw Matthew feel that night. And, you know, I'm part of this generation called Generation Z. It's roughly 1996 through 2010. And we have a lot of different names, right? We're Generation Z. Some people call us a social media generation. I think that's kind of cool. The technology generation. But the one that we have that I'm not proud of is the mass shooting generation, the school shooting drill generation. Our generation is used to school shooting drills. And, you know, I live in a state right now where our governor is looking to change what students learn in school, making sure, Governor Ron DeSantis, making sure that students don't learn about the true history of our country, and that we're going through these school shooting drills until one day maybe that drill isn't a drill. And we've seen the uptick in gun violence, especially in with our students. And for folks, if you don't know, in the United States, the top leading cause of death for children is gun violence. That number just changed about a few weeks ago. So that means that more than car accidents, more than any sickness, more than anything, guns kill more kids in this country than anyone else, which means our children are at the front lines of this epidemic in our country. And, you know, we just had Uvalde just happen, which brought up the conversation again when we lost 19 children, 2 teachers. And, you know, the day after, I actually just got this morning, so I'll show you all. I'm going to hang it up in my office. But this is the Uvalde news that came out the day after I ordered it, as a reminder of the work that needs to be done. But now we come to the conversation of what can we do moving forward. You know, right now I'm running for Congress, but before this, you know, since coming out of high school, I started working on campaigns and working to make that better world. When I worked at the ACLU, then working at March for Our Lives, where we worked with thousands of young people across the country to help them exercise their power, their voice at creating the world that they deserve to live in. And I'll tell y'all, I wouldn't be where I'm at right now. Not that I'm in some huge place, but I wouldn't be the person I am today if it wasn't for the educators and it wasn't for the people in my life that helped me feel empowered to dare to ask for more, to dare to ask for better, to dare to ask for safety in our schools and safety in our communities. I remember when I came back from that Sandy Hook vigil, I had my call to action, right? I had my experience. It inspired a conviction in me that led me to make a life decision. But we know that there's a lot of times where we make life decisions and they don't really come to fruition, right? The best one is New Year's Eve, New Year's resolutions, right? A lot of times nothing happens with those. So it was not just up to me, but up to the people in my life to help, foster the life of advocacy I wanted to live in. I remember my teachers working with me and challenging my assumptions on things that I thought were true and that weren't. I remember my teachers working with me to figure out, Maxwell, you want to be an advocate for safer schools. So what's next? I remember Mr. Watson, my social studies teacher, who would sit down with me at lunch and, talk to me about politics, talk to me about how to work in this system alongside communities to make a difference. And, a lot of it has to do with just the positive environment that was created, allowing students to flourish, and a place where I could learn. I sat down with my teachers and I said, I wanted to learn more about how gun violence impacts students. And the flexibility of our teachers to really pivot and talk about what that means for our students and what that means for our classrooms was helpful. It was there that I learned that we lose 100 people a day due to gun violence in the United States. In fact, through the length of this call, we'll lose about 4 lives. That we have over 250 mass shootings that have happened this year. And we're only halfway through the year in the United States. And that there's a mass shooting in a school about every 3 weeks. In this country. It doesn't always make the news, but it's there and it's happening. And I spoke about the issues we're having in Florida, but we all know that real education is fostering that environment where students can believe that they're not just the leaders of tomorrow, but they're the leaders of today. And that's something that I've been speaking with educators, but people across the state and across this district about, is we need to work to empower students to believe that their voice matters now, and the things that they're going through now as students, future generations didn't go through at that level, right? Of school shootings, of crushing student debt, of different things like that. And building this world where students don't believe that they're in the situation because they're living beyond their means, but because they've been denied the means to live. And for me, it's really having our educators and advocates for education sitting down and working with students and helping people plan out how they can best be an advocate in their community. And it's not all about just running for office. It's about having those conversations, real conversations in schools, in after school programs that can help students feel like they can make that difference because they can. Something I'll kind of, start to end with this. Something that really gives me a lot of hope is the March for Our Lives chapter at my old high school. It is a group of some of the most badass young people I've ever met in my life. Fighting every day. They go to every school board meeting. They speak at public comment. They go everywhere in the community, and they're always speaking alongside their teachers' unions, working together to make sure that we have safe classrooms, because we know everybody on this call knows the importance of education. But unfortunately, especially here in the States, we have students who are not able, we have students who are denied the right to grow up in this country. And so figuring out how can we create a country where people where students aren't looking over their shoulder, where we're not doing these school shooting drills. And it's about creating a country where we have more preventative measures than reactive measures. And it's not about Democrats versus Republican. It's about the people versus gun violence, universal background checks in this country. So that way people who, shouldn't have a gun don't get a gun. And there are places where we can come together. We've been saying in the movement that this time is different. This time is different. And it is. We see that Republicans and gun owners have come to the table in a way that they never have before. Folks haven't been catching up. Just yesterday, the Senate introduced a bipartisan legislation. It's a landmark piece of gun violence legislation. And it's the best thing we've seen in 30 years. Is it everything we need? No, right? Of course not. But it is a huge step forward, and it will save lives. It'll save lives in schools. And so continuing to push, continuing to work and foster that environment for our students where, like that video I played, they believe that their power can change their communities, and letting them know that it can. And at the end of the day, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the educators in my life who helped me believe that. and help me lead my life of advocacy. So again, y'all, thank you so much. Something I always like to say that might sound familiar to folks is, we live in a world where medicine and law and like politics, these are things that are really important for sustaining the life that we live in our communities and in society. But art, love, culture, education, these are things that make life worth it. And so I want to thank you all for working to make life worth it. And I want to thank all the students who are, doing that as well and working to make a life that is safe, because that's what we deserve. So again, y'all, thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Maxwell, thank you. Absolutely. And Annie, Karina, for connecting all of us. We're so grateful. We have some questions and we'd love to hear from all of you as well about, some of our colleagues are doing safe schools work to end, for example, gender-based violence in schools globally, or really ensure that human rights and civil rights are being taught in all school curricula. And so it's so important to hear what's happening in Florida in your context. And we're grateful for your leadership with the different organizations. We've shared in the chat the link to ways people can get involved with March for Our Lives, but and we've shared the link to the video. Thank you so much. It's really powerful. If there are other aspects that people can help with, that seems to be the first sort of round of questions. And we'd love to hear from all of you. So Suzanne says, the gun violence situation in the US is incomprehensible and shameful. Being safe at school should not be considered a big ask. And Krista shares, Maxwell, so impressed by your advocacy and leadership on these important issues. Thank you for all that you're doing. Later she asked, what advice would you give to young people who would like to get involved with advocacy but feel the system doesn't value youth voices? And Stephanie Pena also chimed in, Maxwell, this was so powerful. I'm wondering if you could also speak on the role of parents in this advocacy movement as well. And Karina says, thank you so much for your important work, Maxwell. You're such a great example of the power of youth voices to push for real and meaningful change. Can you speak to some of the examples of how the organizations you've worked for have helped foster youth activism and how other organizations can push for more youth-led activism? And then we have a flurry of ideas and questions rolling now. So Evelyn also said, Maxwell, you and your cohort are stellar examples of youth activism, and good luck with your run for Congress. We need you here in Washington. I don't see any hands raised within Zoom, but if other people want to come in either with questions verbally or in the chat box, please do. And Maxwell, I realize we've thrown a lot at you, mostly applause, but we'd love your thoughts on some of these great questions, and feel free to share back with the rest of us. This represents different organizations across the Global Campaign for Education US Coalition, organizations and civil society partners, nonprofits, big and small, youth-led and student and advocacy groups, teachers, etc. So we'd really love your thoughts about how we can truly together make sure that this isn't just one moment in time, that we actively support real legislative change and the real changes from the local to the national to the global levels that are needed. Thank you.
Yeah, 100%. And, to answer some of these questions, the role of parents is extremely important. When I was in high school, I actually sat on the school board for 2 years as a student representative. It was a great experience. But something I noticed was just how powerful the voices of our parents are and can be. Much like my own journey, my parents, like my educators, were extremely important in fostering an environment where I could do what I want to do. But also we have to understand that parents have a vested interest in the safety of the students as well, because it's their children and we're talking about the lives of their children, of their community. So I always encourage parents to continue to go to school board meetings, but also run for school board. Run for these offices. Here in the States, we have a group called Moms for Liberty that has come up, which is a group, it sounds good, it's really bad. It's a group of, mothers who are fighting for anti-vaccine measures in schools, anti-mask mandates, anti-anything to end gun violence and stuff like that. So the opposition, which is a very small group of people, they are organizing. And so we need our parents to organize as well. Parents who want to keep their students safe in schools, and people who want to be pro-science and pro-ending gun violence. And so I encourage people to run for office as well. There's an amazing organization here called Run for Something. You can just Google it or go to runforsomething.org. Their entire purpose is to help people run for local office, whether it be school board, whether it be a state rep, comptroller, anything like that, soil and water, anything like that. We need more parents to run for these offices. So running for office and also advocating in the local community is going to be really important. The thing I'll say to the question on helping to inspire young folks who feel like their voices are not valued. This is a really good question. And, when I started working at March for Our Lives in 2019, they said, Maxwell, we have 2 goals for you. Number 1, help us take our moment, which was the largest youth-led march in the history of our country, and help us build a movement, and then help us use that movement to get the highest youth voter turnout in the history of our country in 2020. And when we did our polling, what we found out in early 2020 is that young people were very disillusioned with the system. Here's a very disturbing number. Over 30% of young folks were very much convinced that there would be a violent civil war in our lifetime in this country. Very concerning number, because that means faith in our democracy, especially with young folks, is eroding. So we had to take a step back and think about what messaging, and not just messaging, but like what outlook and vision of the future works in bringing young people in. Because I think, a lot of the times, especially with politics here, it's about giving people something to vote against and not something to vote for. People want to be inspired. People want to close their eyes and see themselves in a world where they have healthcare, where they have safe streets, where they have affordable housing, the things they need to live their lives, right? It's not Democrat versus Republican. This isn't this is just people and humanity-centered politics, which is something we should all be about. And so we decided to speak with young people about the future we want to build together, and being honest with them about the fact that sometimes that takes time, especially in this country. The other thing I'll say to this is I think it's important to also be honest with young folks about the tactics and the work that needs to be done. What I always say, and look, I've been a part of the electoral work, working in the system, getting people to go vote. I've been involved in protests during the Black Lives Matter protest. I took to the streets here. I would work on Zoom. And for people who work at nonprofits and really anywhere during COVID, you'll know Zoom 9 to 5. And then at 5, I'd grab a slice of pizza or something, and I would grab my backpack and I'd go to downtown Orlando, and I would march till 1 a.m. for Black Lives. I was actually arrested. I went to jail for peaceful protests here in my hometown. The reason I bring this up is because I do believe protest is important, but I also believe voting is important. And I feel like a lot of the times, especially with young folks, we tend to believe they're mutually exclusive, but they're not. We need to do everything under the sun to get to the world that we deserve to live in. So yes, vote, but also protest. And yes, protest, but also go and lobby your legislators. And I believe that when we paint that holistic picture and we talk about how culture change is also a part of that, and changing hearts and minds is a part of this battle, I think young folks have understand more about the longevity of the movement and their place in it. A big reason why people are disillusioned with politics is because they're led to believe that if you vote for me, your life will change tomorrow, right? That's like the promise of politics and the promise of getting elected. And what that creates is people who feel lied to because they have been lied to. And when you're lied to all the time, you really don't want anything to do with that person anymore. And so I've made it a point in my campaign to be very honest with people about my platform being about the future I believe in and the things I'm going to fight for. Right. I am running to be one person in a congressional body of hundreds of people. And so I can promise you what I will fight for and how hard I will fight for it, and what I can do with constituent services here for our people. But I will not go to people and promise them that next session, this is going to pass or that is going to pass just to get votes, because that works to create a system which people are disillusioned and are led to a lie. So either way, so that's what I'd say on that. To the question on how other organizations can help push for more youth-led activism and advocacy. This is a great question. A lot of times we see organizations who are youth-focused, who don't necessarily give young people the opportunity to lead. And I think this is a great way at helping foster youth advocacy, but also help fostering youth leadership is let young people lead, right? Help give them the resources they need to run the meeting, to own a project. Something that we did at March for Our Lives that I'm really proud of is we had a staffing model that we called the student staff model. And essentially the way it worked is our national staff was about 40 people, but only about 10 of them were full-time adult staff, right? Like people over the age of 21 or 21 to 40, like adult staff. The majority of our national staff was actually people currently in schools. And so we had this student staff model where they weren't necessarily part-time staff, they were flexible staff, people who were paid to do the work they were doing. And we had fellows and interns as well that were more on like a credit basis, but these folks were given the opportunity to work at our organization in an official capacity to fight for the future they believe in. So what I always let folks know is, look at the model of your organization and see how can you fit young people in. Something that we're pushing the Biden administration to do, President Biden to do, is add an office of youth engagement where there can be folks who are young folks and they're working in the White House to engage young people, add an office of violence prevention, and add students to the board who can be at the table to talk about it. Something in the movement space that we always say is nothing about us without us, right? And what that means is the people closest to the problem are also the people closest to the solution. And so looking at the models and figuring out how you can involve young people in actual decision making and giving them the opportunity to own projects and have ownership, I think you'll be surprised, sometimes surprised, but also it'll make you happy to see just how young people can be involved and make decisions that are great. So either way, that would be my advice on that.
Maxwell, that's amazing. Thank you so much. And absolutely, there's so much more work to be done, but this is really inspiring. One question I would also like to quickly raise is, you're seeing here a representation from some organizations outside the US. We're so grateful to people joining across time zones as well as across the US. So what can organizations do to support the work that you're talking about? And these might be human rights focused, education rights organizations that cover school safety plus lots of other areas. You all are, the work that you've been doing, your colleagues at March for Our Lives, for example, previously are the experts, right? And especially like you're saying, students, teachers who've been unfortunately having to really grapple with school safety within schools on a day-to-day basis. So the policy proposals that you just mentioned, I don't know if you could see, but you got a lot of applause, Zoom applause, from people really instantly chiming in and saying, absolutely, we agree. And across the child and youth advocacy space, many organizations, Kathy with First Focus is here today, Rachel Clement with Child Fund, others have also been pushing for stronger child and youth focused representation at the White House and across US government. So I think there's real room to join arms, link arms and have stronger voices together. So we'd love any additional thoughts or suggestions you might have for ways that organizations and advocates can be supportive of this great work. Thank you.
Of course. Well, I'd say on the gun violence front, something that's always really helpful is having people from different experiences and different organizations reach out to legislators, whether it be via letter, via fax, via phone call, via Zoom meeting, and letting them know why, from their perspective and their experience, that legislation that saves lives in a proactive way is important. People have heard from us. Right? People have heard from March for Our Lives, David Hogg, right? Like our friends here, like when they're talking about this, I think a lot of times legislators who tend to be on the opposite side of this issue, already know where we stand. But when you have organizations, human rights organizations, something that we've been doing now is we've gotten teachers unions involved in this fight in a way that they've never been before. It's bringing together these experiences and showing folks that no matter who you are, this is a human-centered approach to policy. It's not just Democrats versus Republican. A lot of times it's this whole conversation of credible messengers, right? Who's the most credible messenger here? And it's everybody. And so having organizations even outside of the states writing to legislators here. One of the most powerful things about March for Our Lives, the first one and this last one, is it wasn't just marches in the US, they were across the entire world. People marching saying, folks, it was like a marching in solidarity with students here in the US. So I would say reaching out to legislators is important. There are creative ways to do this. If y'all ever want to, be in contact, we'll definitely leave our email there. Definitely have a lot of ideas on ways that you can creatively protest from anywhere. Whether it's fax campaigns, which sounds weird, but every congressional office has a fax machine, and you can, send that fax machine 1,000 letters of students and people from anywhere talking about what they believe. And here's the thing with phone calls, your phone call can send to a voice message, but when you fax someone something, that fax is getting to the other end. And so either way, there are creative ways that you can kind of protest, but also, come to the table in good faith and explain why, this is important. Having human rights organizations at the table, I think is a game changer. And so that's what I'd say on that. The last thing, which was, it was on, more youth representation in government, which I'm obviously 100% for as a young person running for office. But we also need youth representation in government where young people don't need to run for office, right? Where they're given the opportunity to serve their country and be at the table in official capacities. And so whether it's writing to the White House, whether it's working with members of Congress, something that I'm really excited to work on as a member, God willing, is being able to start official committees in the United States Congress that bring young people to the table, where young folks have the opportunity to not just witness the process, because I think a lot of times when we talk about involving young people in government, it's a tour of the Capitol or something like that, which is great, right? We want tours of the Capitol. We want people to learn, but we also want young people at the table, right? And we want young people we want to give them the opportunity to actually, learn about what's going on and comment on issues. Again, nothing about us without us, and young folks are the experts, right? Something that my friend David, who was one of the founders of March for Our Lives, always said is that, all these legislators would a lot of times say, we need to bring in experts, and there's experts in different fields, but no one's more of an expert on a school shooting than that student who has survived it. And so for me, it's continuing to, push to have survivors, but also young people in the room and involved in the legislative process. And that's something that I'm committed to doing. And that I'll hopefully be really excited to work with all of you in advocating for in the United States Congress, and doing everything that we can.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And we're so grateful. Absolutely. We'd love to connect with you, your colleagues, and others that are doing this important work. And to all colleagues who are joining the conversation today, please continue to share your ideas. And we're grateful to colleagues who are sharing in the chat as well. Excellent points all around, Maxwell. Please, if folks haven't had a chance to ask a question or share your thoughts and ideas, please do so. This is definitely a key time for everybody to advocate together. And with that, Maxwell, again, huge thanks to you, to Lissy, to everybody for joining the conversation today. We're going to share a little bit about what's coming up next. We'd love to hear from everybody about any upcoming events, marches, work that's happening collaboratively. And to kick it off, I'll pass to my colleague Stephanie Pena for the latest and greatest on the inclusive education and early childhood community of practice. Over to you, Stephanie.
Great, thank you, Jennifer, and thanks again, Maxwell. It was super powerful. I'm really excited to announce our next Inclusive Education and Early Childhood Community of Practice meeting will be on Wednesday, July 20th at 9 a.m. ET. I believe Krista will put a link in the chat for how to register, but we will be hearing from our colleagues from HI, Humanity Inclusion, and the work that they've been doing on teacher training on inclusive education, I believe in Sierra Leone. Yes, and also from our colleagues at Building Tomorrow on their really innovative approach to teacher training as well. And then we'll be hearing from some research specifically on inclusive education teacher training. So we really encourage you guys to register, and we hope to see you on July 20th.
Terrific. Thank you, Stephanie. And welcome to our colleague, Vernor Muñoz. Vernor, we know you are extremely busy, so we're grateful that you could join us. Let me just make sure that you're able to come in. Perfect. You are a Zoom expert as well as expert in all things. We shared full bios earlier. Many of you know Vernor well. Vernor Muñoz is the head of policy, advocacy, and campaigns with the Global Campaign for Education Secretariat based in Costa Rica. The GCE Secretariat globally overall is based in South Africa. And we're so lucky. Vernor does amazing work. He's a former UN Special Rapporteur on the right to education from 2004 to 2010. I was really honored to meet Vernor when I served our constituency regionally on the GCE board for a term back in 2015 to 2018, and he was with Plan at the time. And I just always remember, as some of us are going into these Transforming Education Summit, pre-summit meetings next week at the Unesco headquarters, I was literally on my second day on the job in my current role. And my predecessor, Dr. Ed Gregert, as he was retiring from the GCE-US director role, said, for day 2, would you like to travel to Paris? And I landed, of course. And I landed jet lagged, literally, didn't have a computer yet, was like literally just starting and on the job. And Vernor was one of the kindest, most warm, collaborative colleagues to welcome me into the GCE movement and family. So we're grateful for his amazing leadership, but also he just brilliantly brings people together across over 120 different countries, which is remarkable. And we're so grateful to you, Vernor, for joining us today to help guide us and partner organizations through some of these fantastic policy, advocacy, and campaigning moments for this sort of once in a lifetime UN Transforming Education Summit. And HLPF will be happening now in person in New York next month in July. So we'd love to hear the latest and greatest across the movement, Vernor, and how people not just in the US, but globally are joining the call today, how we can all be supportive and help to achieve education for all together. Over to you, Vernor.
Well, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Jennifer, for your always kind and undeserved words on my work. Thank you so much. You're very kind. And apologies for joining late. I was in another call and I couldn't join earlier. So colleagues, it's always a pleasure sharing with you, and congratulations for the fantastic work that GCE-US always do. I think that we're all very proud of what you are doing and your leadership as well. So thank you for that. So let me quickly brief you a bit on 2 major events. The one is the Transforming Education Summit and Pre-Summit happening next week, the Pre-Summit in Paris, and then the High-Level Political Forum. So let me start with the Transforming Education. I don't know if you have discussed earlier on this, Jennifer, maybe.
We were waiting for you, so
okay.
yeah, no, no worries, thank you.
Okay, well, as you know, this is a major event happening in two legs, the pre-summit in June, and then on the 19th of September, the summit in the context of the United Nations General Assembly. We understand that in principle, it will be happening on Monday, 19th of September, but we heard yesterday, Jennifer and I, that and Stephanie and Kristen, colleagues, that we will probably have 2 more days in September. This is not decided yet, but this would open the door for more participation from civil society. So we have been involved in the all the preparatory process of the summit. As you may know, we have 2 representatives in the advisory committee, which are Rifat Saba, the GCE president, and Helen Dabu, who is the general coordinator of the ASBAI as well. So they too are taking part of the advisory committee. So through them, we have had the chance to influence a bit in all the preparatory process. We have also been very active in sharing the proposed papers for the action tracks, and we have shared all the documents with all membership. And thanks to those who have had the chance to provide inputs and recommendations. Papers are still ongoing. There will be another round of global consultations probably in July. But so far, we managed to provide inputs. The consultations hasn't been really, how can I say, meaningful in all cases. In some cases, consultation have been organized just as a panel of discussion rather than a consultation itself. So it has been a kind of, in some cases, chaotic process, but still we managed to influence in a very meaningful way in some cases. I can take as an example the Action Track 5, where we managed to have a great colleague there as part of the facilitator role, which is David Archer. So I can tell you that in the case of Action Track 5 on financing, we have managed to have a great input in the paper. Then we are also taking part of the Advocacy Hub. I see Jennifer very active there. And yesterday we had a very interesting conversation with the facilitators of the engagement process. So we are also active in the advocacy team who are taking part of the process. Now, regarding national consultations, here's a very tricky situation. You know that there is an ongoing process on national consultations on the summit. The consultations are mainly directed to governments. Despite our efforts, we haven't had the chance to have concrete guidelines to engage civil society, national educations, coalitions involved in the consultations. However, we decided just to direct our colleagues to the UN resident coordinator in order to take contact and to provide inputs. But we really think that civil society organizations should be part of these national consultations, and we feel that the best would be having a consolidated report from the country, including civil society consultations. However, spotlight reports are always welcome, so we are encouraging our members to provide specific reports to resident coordinators. There are also guidelines produced by the Secretariat on how to provide specific reports in these national consultations. Now, regarding the pre-summit, yeah, we feel that the organization process has been a little bit chaotic. For the time being, there are no clarity who are participating in the pre-summit. I mean, many of us have already received the confirmation of registration, but many of us are still waiting for the opportunity. So by now, we still don't know who is attending the pre-summit in Paris. And this is a kind of a problematic situation. I feel that this has been not really good organized. That's my feeling, but we will see. We think that the pre-summit will be obviously a great opportunity for us for advocacy purposes, no? I feel that any consultation is a good opportunity for advocacy. So we are, yeah, I mean, we are very happy to participate and to try to influence a bit. And we are also developing a communication strategy for the pre-summit, and we feel that it's crucial to come up with a consolidated messages to states, to governments, but also to all participants on the summit. So we will try to produce interviews to come up with clear messages, pictures, etc. So this is something we can do as a movement. And then I think that after the pre-summit, we will be able to organize a call with GCE members in order to discuss the outcomes and to put in the table our common understandings and reflections on the pre-summit. So before I go to the HLPF, maybe we can just quickly open the door for comments or questions. Jennifer, if that is okay with you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I know you're covering a lot, so we're so grateful. I don't see any questions yet in the chat, but colleagues, feel free to raise your hand on Zoom or take yourself off mute to come in if you have a question or comment. Vernor, to kick it off, I would be curious, you know, in the US context, I don't see a US national consultation on the map. And of course, we're grappling with a unique situation in that the US government needs to rejoin UNESCO. So if you have any advice for us, when we talk to colleagues at Unesco, they say that the Transforming Education Summit is not just being run by Unesco, but the Secretariat does seem to be housed there. So that is a barrier we're running into. The good news is, just yesterday afternoon, the US House of Representatives, for the first time ever, included in their fiscal year 2023 appropriations bill support for there to be funding for the US government to pay those dues and arrears for UNESCO. It's one step of many that are going to be needed to fix this problem, but it's at least a very positive step in the right direction, with thanks to everybody for their fantastic advocacy to make that possible. But if you do have any advice for colleagues, for example, you know, and colleagues, please let us know if you or somebody from your organization plans to be at these upcoming global events. First, next week in Paris for the Transforming Education Pre-Summit, like Vernor's been kindly helping us navigate. And then for 2 weeks in July, the HLPF on Sustainable Development Goals, the high-level political forum. This is a unique moment because the Sustainable Development Goal 4 on education will be one of the focus areas, which doesn't come up every year. And Vernor's a real expert on that. And then the Transforming Education Summit itself, September 19th through maybe 21st in New York. So we'd love to hear if any of you are considering attending, thinking about doing side events together. And like you're saying, Vernor, if there are ways that people can help. And also as advocates, are you hearing from Helen and you know, colleagues that are involved in navigating at all levels of the test, Transforming Education Summit? In the early stages, it seemed that there might be some problematic things put forward related to public funds going to for-profit entities for education. Just wondering if there's anything as advocates that we can be helpful with to make sure that the outcomes are as strong as possible, both within our national context and globally. And then I see that Sergio has a hand up. We'll go to him. And then there are a couple of questions in the chat box. Krista asks, does anyone plan to travel to Paris for next week? And Techua says, thanks, Vernor, for your update. Really helpful. Would be helpful to know a bit more about national consultations and where you have seen them being successful, if any, as we're hoping to get our country staff involved at Site Savers, but this has been difficult. Also, still waiting to hear back whether I'll be going next week or not, fingers crossed. So that looks like a good question too. If you have any suggestions on how people can get a response back in a timely way so that they can participate. Over to you, Sergio.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Vernor. Just wanted to ask, this is Sergio Ramirez. I'm Chief of Party for the All Children Reading Grand Challenge based here in DC. Work with all the ed tech for reading, particularly, especially with children with disabilities. How I see the different tracks, and we definitely are interested in following these conversations. I think there was a meeting last 3 weeks ago with the Global Education Forum. I think this is on, and I heard about the summit. How is it, if we are few in our team but want to participate in several of these tracks, is it possible to register in different tracks? And number 2 is, what is the role of international NGOs like World Vision, which is where All Children Reading is housed in this forum? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sergio. Well, first of all, on national consultations, I understand that for the pre-summit, there will be 30 reports from national consultation processes, but the Secretariat is expecting to have at least 60 reports coming from different countries by September. We feel that this is a very low number. We feel that this should be they should increase, and we should push for governments to, to enhance and to be ready to expand the consultations. Specifically in the case of the US, I would encourage GCE-US to just prepare a report, an alternative report or spotlight report, whatever you name it, on what's going on in the country in terms of the different action tracks. So I would not expect to have any, any response from the Secretariat. I would just go ahead and prepare the report and share it widely, as wide as possible. And maybe this would be a way to encourage government to say something. Yes, you are right. It's not only UNESCO, it's also the UN architecture. Just remember that this summit has been convened by the Secretary General himself. So yeah, this involves all the UN universe, but also civil society and governments. So I would encourage you to just go ahead and prepare the spotlight report without waiting for any signal from anybody. Regarding Sergio's comments, yes, absolutely. You can just send your comments and proposals to each of the action tracks directly to the TES Secretariat. We have provided the contact details, but I will be happy to recall and to send it again. So anytime, suggestions are welcome, I think. And we will be also happy to bridge any contact with the Secretariat if you find that useful. So that's very welcome. And regarding INGOs, I feel that INGOs are very active. I mean, in the case of the Advocacy Hub, I see several INGOs clearly participating, and I think World Vision is one of them. So, yeah, I mean, I see them very actively participating maybe more active than some national education coalitions. So I would encourage them to continue doing this job.
Thank you so much, Vernor. And we see that there's lots of activity in the chat with people that will be either attending themselves or colleagues. Please do continue to share that information and we'll help each other promote. It sounds like some of the side events and side meetings will be up to the organizers to determine if they'll be also open for people to join virtually. So we know for people for whom it was an understandable barrier to not get a visa in time, to not be able to travel to Paris, that people will want to join in a hybrid meetings and virtually wherever possible. So please continue to help spread the word about that information. Vernor, anything else that you think would be helpful for folks to know on the HLPF front? It's relatively recent that that will not be only virtual, that there will be an opportunity for people to join some of those UN facing meetings and the like in New York as well in July. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. But just let me quickly say that the pre-summit will cover 3 big issues. The first day will be focused on the youth summit, on the youth issues, and the Global Campaign for Education will be also facilitating a session on education in emergencies and youth participation. The second leg is related to the analysis and inputs to different action tracks. So this is a clear political opportunity for all of us. And there will be also a business summit in the pre-summit, a business segment or something like that. So there might be also chances for us to discuss private engagement in education, and from our point of view, yeah, we are ready to criticize the privatization and commodification of education and the role of corporate sector in this process. So just for you to know that this is also happening. Regarding HLPF, as you know, this year DG4 will be under review, so it's an important date for us. We managed to get a speaker in the official session. Will be Madeleine Zuniga, who is the vice president, the GCE vice president. So she has been nominated as lead discussant during the DG4 panel. So that's a great opportunity. And we also invited colleagues from GCE membership to nominate themselves as speakers from the floor. So this is also an opportunity. I understand that Krista is joining in person at HLPF. Is Kristen or Stephanie? I don't remember now.
Stephanie Pena.
That's okay.
So we are very happy to have her in the GC delegation. So there will be also opportunities to speak from the floor. It will be only 1 to 2 minutes, but still it's a good opportunity just to send a strong message during the discussions during the 3 days of the first week forum. Then, as you may know, we also prepare a sectoral paper on behalf of the Educational Academia Stakeholder Group. As every year, we have done this job, and we also input the ministerial declaration, which is the political statement of the HLPF. And we will have the voluntary national reviews. We have this year 47 countries reporting, so we encourage our members to participate in this process, and we also encourage our members to produce spotlight reports responding to the official voluntary national reviews as well. We are organizing 3 side events for the HLPF this year. The one for the Education Academia Stakeholder Group is happening on the 5th of July at 1 p.m. It will be fully virtual, although it's also true that there might be some in-person events that have been organized. We couldn't change to the in-person because it was announced very late, so we need to continue with the virtual possibility, which is a good way to move forward, I think, because it would grant us the possibility to get many people discussing in this side event. We have other 2 side events. Another one showing the spotlights reports produced by our members. It's happening on the 12th of July at 8 a.m. New York time. We are still organizing this. And the other one, which is the more substantive one on SDG 4, is happening on the 14th of July at 8 a.m. New York time as well. So we are focusing in this SDG 4 side event on the 4 strategic areas where GCE works, and they are inclusive and equality, transformative education, education financing, and education in emergencies. So we are gathering experts in order to deliver presentations on these 4 specific areas as a way to analyze the state of realization of SDG 4 concretely. And there are small delegation going to New York this year, around 8 people, I think, so far. So maybe we'll have the chance to get together and to discuss a little bit the developments of this event. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vernor. So helpful to know how people can get involved with both the Transforming Education Summit and HLTS. So really exciting. Please continue to keep us posted as your organization is planning advocacy around those important upcoming moments. And thanks to all the information that's already been shared in the chat. We just have a few minutes left, so want to highlight some upcoming advocacy opportunities. We're holding a Global Education Advocacy Day on July 19th. This is especially relevant for those of you who are based in the US or who have registered to vote in the US. Please register. We are including the link in the chat, and we would love for you to do that by this Friday, June 24th, already reaching the end of June. We'll have several meetings that day with different constituents to meet with them and talk about the importance of US funding for international basic education. We also wanted to highlight that we are supporting the READ Act reauthorization. This is the Reinforcing Education Accountability and Development reauthorization of 2017. So in 2017, it went for 5 years. And now in 2022, we're looking at reauthorizing it for an additional 5 years. None of the text was changed, and it has bipartisan and bicameral support, which is really great. So we're optimistic that this can move forward. We would love for you to fill out the form that we will include in the chat to urge your representatives to take action on this and to really support this, making sure that a generation of young people doesn't miss out on the opportunities that come with education due to the multifaceted challenges of the pandemic and global humanitarian crises we're facing right now. Stephanie kindly highlighted the Inclusive Education and Early Childhood Community of Practice coming up on July 20th, and that link was shared previously. And we also want you to add to your calendars that the next Global Campaign for Education US Coalition Meeting will take place on August 16th, also at 9 a.m. We'd love for you to get that on your calendars. We're trying to incorporate a focus both on International Youth Day, which will be August 12th, and then August 19th, I believe, is World Humanitarian Day. So having both of those youth and humanitarian foci, excuse me. And yeah, please keep us in the loop as you are planning for the Transforming Education Summit and other upcoming advocacy moments, and let us know what your organization has in the works. We'd love to support you. Thanks so much for joining this conversation today and actively engaging on these important topics. We're appreciative of your partnership. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you, Krista.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.